Welcome back. Let's get right into the papers. And of course, Mr. Dayo Akintobi, journalist and public affairs analyst, is back with us right here in the studio. I know for you it's TGIM,
yes,
but I can't help but say TGIF. It's good to see you again, sir.
It's good to be back, and thank God it's Friday. Looking forward to the weekend.
All right, let's get right into it. And this Nigeria is for starters this morning. Of course, it picks up from our opening thoughts with that visit by a body of traditional rulers led by the Olubadan of Ibadan land to the villa. And it leads with what the president, spoke strongly to. Prioritize citizens' welfare. Tinubu tackles governors. And the president is talking tough this morning. He says they now get more money. They should stop wasting it on less impactful projects. Reveals why FG refused to pay ransom for release of Oriri abductees. Mr. Akintobi, two strong issues there coming from Mr. President: development at the subnationals, and of course the Oriri concern that got the whole country, mourning, but we're now celebrating anyway.
Yes, the one that struck me in that exchange was when the president essentially said, stop building flyovers where there's no traffic, to utilize the flyovers, instead build roads that are more useful for community expansion. Yes, it is true that in light of the aftermath of subsidy removal and liberalization of the FX market, that the governors have received a lot more money, but we're not seeing that a commensurate development at sub-national levels is what the president was complaining about. Essentially, what he's saying is, don't put all the responsibility on the federal government, because we have a tendency when we complain about lack of development, about quality of life issues, we have a tendency to focus solely on the federal government as if it's the beginning and the end of all our woes. But what he's saying is that look more towards your governors. Really, all politics is local. The more local governance is, the closer it is to the people. So I would even go further and say, look even to your local government chairman, because they're the closest to communities. So without a doubt.
But is local government autonomy being implemented?
But truth is, if the states are getting more, the local governments should also be getting more. Whether they actually get it is another question entirely altogether. But I align with what the president says, that we should hold our governors more accountable and more responsible in terms of community development, in terms of quality of life issues, in terms of our welfare and our well-being. Issues like security, issues like minimum wage, things to do with foreign policy. Those things are exclusive to the federal government. But when it comes to issues of our daily lives, the levels of government that are closer to us are more responsible. So I agree with him on that we should task our governors a whole lot more. It's not just about building flyovers and beating your chest that you put up a bridge here or there. What impact? I try and make a distinction between achievement and impact. You can beat your chest about building bridges, but what impact is that bridge having in the lives of your people? You need to see more impactful interventions from our state governors, is what the president is saying, and I agree with him on that. On the Oriri issue, there's still a gray area, or a number of unanswered questions, because I listened to a few interviews from some of the victims, and some of the reports seem to indicate that they were actually released and taken to civilization where the army was waiting to receive them. If those reports are accurate, then it's more indicative of a release than a rescue. I know that most governments around the world have a policy that we do not negotiate with terrorists. That is on the surface position of every government. But is that the reality? There are some situations where, for national security reasons, you won't admit that you did when you actually did, because not every situation that is amenable to kinetic measures to resolve. In this particular Oriri case, as you said, Mrs. Alamu, the principal, was talking about the fact that at one point they were even more scared of the government raids than they were of the terrorists, in terms of all the bombing that happened at a point in time. So I think for me, what matters most is that they've come home, they're safe, and that government is trying to take preventive measures. The only reason we're talking about whether it was a rescue or a release is because it happened in the first instance. So why don't we now pay more attention to how are we able to prevent future occurrences? Look, the president has taken a step a few days ago. He has expanded the military from 8 divisions to 12. He says that will increase, that will shorten response time, it will make intervention more effective. For me, the most important thing is let's do something. Let's keep trying different things. We've been doing the same thing the same way and expecting different results for too long, and it's not working that way. So if he's coming up with new fangled ways to try things, you won't know until you try. So let's give him a break and see if this new intervention is going to be beneficial to the fight against terror.
You know, the twist to that, I try to look at all sides.
Yes.
The release or the rescue.
Yes.
On one hand, there's something the government is seeing. On the other hand, there's something the victim is seeing.
Yes.
There's also the possibility that pressure made them to say, keep moving. There's also the point of whether it was whatever happened.
Right.
But the government has said this was a rescue.
Yes.
And the president, there's something I wanted you to comment on before we go to the next paper. The president speaking about the MO. How did you receive that? Of saying we're ready to finish their families and their communities. That was not a joke from a commander-in-chief. I've never heard the president say that. That means this is no longer a joke.
No, it's not. Definitely, desperate times call for desperate measures. I mean, there's diplomatic talk, there's presidential talk, to where you're always measured in your language, and you don't want to come across as being too extreme. But for the president to have gone to the point of publicly stating now, we'll finish you, we'll finish your family, and family involves women and little children. As you said, human rights activists all over the world will be up in arms and no, you can't do that, you can't, even if you intend to do it, you can't say it. But I guess he's pushed to the wall, and when you're pushed to the wall, you bounce back, and it's at a point where I will do anything to protect my citizens. So if you dare come after us, we will take gloves off completely.
You know what I say? I think it's also an indirect policy statement.
Yeah.
Without writing anything down. That let it be clear from now on. This is what will happen. If you have family members who are involved in this thing, know that directly or indirectly you are involved.
Yes.
So advise yourself.
Silence is endorsement in this case.
Absolutely.
So, because the people that were found, there was a sentence to life imprisonment.
Yes.
Their role was a concealment.
Yes.
Aid,
yes,
and all of that, because those Ansaru wicked leaders, they wanted that's part of what the president said. They wanted those two people to be rid, and they are in court now. We hope that they get the ultimate punishment anyway.
In a war situation, all bets are off. You suspend habeas corpus, suspend, all rights and all conventions. So if we're in a war situation, forget about the fact that, if you victimize my family, I won't victimize your own. The bottom line is, how will we win this war? If what it takes to do is to simply say, you take my person, I'll take yours. Mano a mano, tit for tat. If that's what's going to resolve it, that's what we have to do.
As long as it's security and not politics, we're good.
Yes, I think it's interesting to hear the presidents, say that. I hope that, as Nigerians would say, I hope he would walk the talk. I hope so. But let's switch gears now to the Vanguard newspaper. It leads with something else. FG Labour clash over use of fuel subsidy removal savings. FG Labour clash over use of fuel subsidy removal savings. The Minister of Finance is saying that these savings were used to service increased workers' salaries and others. And then you're economical with truth, Labour tells FG, and dares the Finance Minister to produce evidence on salary claim. I like the fact that Labour is perhaps putting some sort of pressure on the current government. But I mean, Nigerians are still questioning what exactly are we doing with the monies saved, as subsidies was suspended. Nigerians are still questioning exactly where those monies are being deployed to.
Yes, you see, the thing about it is that we've not seen it reflect in our lives. We've not, all this money these trillions that has been saved from removal of subsidy, which had a negative impact on our spending power, So if you're saving all this money and we're paying for it at the pump and transport and food, then where is the money going? We're not seeing it in the improvements that were promised. The Minister of Finance said yesterday that a report will be issued very soon that showed how the money was spent. But report on paper is simply theory. Well, we want to feel practical. We want to see practical effects, what I call impact. For me, governance is all about impact. What direct benefit are we deriving from government policies? So you've made this policy to remove subsidy. You promised us that it would save so much money because government could no longer afford to sustain those payments, but that the savings would be plowed into infrastructure, into social welfare, into education, into health. We're talking about health. Yeah, the government is beating its chest saying that, they no longer borrow to pay salaries, pensions are paid up to date. But look at resident doctors are talking about going on strike. That's one of the headlines in the papers today, that they're going on strike August 10 simply because their demands have not been met in terms of their remuneration. So there's a disconnect. On the one hand, there's all this money, extra money. Government is saying we're using it judiciously, but the reality on ground says something different. So I can't wait for Minister Oyedele to bring this report that he says will show line by line by line where the expenditure of the subsidy savings is going, because it's a humongous amount of money which, if properly deployed, should have a direct impact in our day. We should see it. We should see the effects. Even if it's prices in the market going down, if it's fuel being more affordable, if it is minimum wage being increased, if it is transportation going down, if it's CNG buses all over the place, we should see it, but we are not. All we're seeing is that we continue to suffer, but government continues to lavishly parade around in convoys.
All right, so when it comes to this economy issue, we're waiting for the campaign seasons to come, and we're going to ask a lot of questions. There's something that we may be missing, and this is my thinking. I think that at the subnational level, some states have voted people that are qualified to be governors. We seem not to have that conversation. We feel that everybody who is a governor is qualified. That's another day before the governors come for me. But you know your governors, you know the ones that are qualified, the ones that don't have any business being in government house. We'll talk about that some other day. But let's talk about New Telegraph. The bottom story, because we've talked about resident doctors issuing that notice, we're going to have the president that's in next week to talk about this as well. But this is an important story I would like you to binge on, which has to do with them saying, if you don't meet our welfare and some of the arrears, 10th of August, we're down tools. And then beneath is Osun State, Osun 2026, which is just about 15 days away or 16 days. INEC deploys undercover operatives to tackle vote buying.
Yes.
Osun, I don't know what it is, but the violence in that state and the conversation around that state in this election is very troubling.
It's a combustible mix, and I'll tell you why. There are many contending factions, particularly parties. Let's look at the history of recent Osun State politics. The governor started his political life as a senator in the APC. He became governor under PDP. He recently defected to Accord. So the governor himself has represented three different competing interests. The immediate past governor of Osun was from the APC, which is currently the party at the center. The APC is still smarting over its loss in 2022. I believe it was that they had the last presidential election. They're still smarting over that loss because they believe they shouldn't have lost. They thought that the then governor Oyotola did a good job, and that by rights he should have been returned to office. So the APC has been bearing its fangs for the last 3.5 years in Osun State, preparing to take back what it regards as its rightful mandate. So by the time you put all those elements into a cauldron and you stir it up, it's a recipe for contention, violence, subterfuge, backhanded tactics. I mean, so vote buying, even in less contentious competitions across states that are not so competitive in terms of contending parties, you already have vote buying issues. Not to now talk of a state that has major, principalities going for each other's throats. Now, the SSG in Osun State recently was arrested by the police, and they said a residence that was tied to him, they found so many millions of naira of cash, and they found electoral items, probably PVC, register PVC. All of these indicated to a wholesale effort to manipulate the election. Now, I think he's been released on bail, but he still has a question.
A peace pact signed yesterday, Adeleke and the APC candidates, Biodun Bamiji.
I really wonder what those peace pacts are really because they are
it's been a war stage set for the election. So,
absolutely.
What is the commitment to peace that we should hold on to?
This is the issue. I mean, it's just a signature on paper, but is there a wholesale effort to persuade our followers? Because at the end of the day, the violence is always fomented by the followers, not the principal characters themselves. But how many of them in actual fact sit down with their followers or their supporters and tell them that, look, we're going to run a clean campaign? I really look forward to a time when we will actually have the kind of elections to where the losers will accept defeat, because that means the election was so above board that you have nothing to complain about. You can't complain about rigging, intimidation, suppression, vote buying, nothing. So let's throw the onus back on INEC to organize the type of elections that will be so above board that there will be no complaints, to the point that there will be no grounds to even say, I didn't lose fairly and squarely, I lost and I accept defeat. That is the standard we should aim for. And to be able to get there, all these issues of vote buying, violence, voter suppression, it's a common fact that in Nigeria, when elections are coming, there's an importation of weapons, there's an empowerment of miscreants, simply because we want to get an upper hand and an edge against our competitor. All those kinds of things don't belong in civilized society in terms of simply because we want to choose those we want to lead us. We don't need that. It might be a utopian fantasy.
Because Akintobi,
it certainly is not, because we're too far away from what the idea is.
Absolutely.
See,
that's my point.
The problem. I have never had problem with politicians because I have close to zero expectation when it comes to certain things and the political class, with respect, because it's a game of interest and people do anything for interest.
Absolutely.
What we should focus on is strengthening institutions like INEC and the police. The day INEC and police and everybody who's in charge of elections are neutral, politicians can do whatever they want, behave anyhow they want, because that's why, just imagine that this Nigeria was, I don't want to do that comparison, but they say you're demarketing the country. Look at what's happening in America with a character like Donald Trump. If not for the strength of the institutions, you know what would have happened. You understand? So at the end of the day, it's about focusing on institutions, but expecting politicians to behave is a very long time.
But I don't think it should be the politicians alone that we should expect to behave.
I'm saying they are the ones in the eye of the storm. I know
just yesterday I was watching this show and you talked about how the CP of Lagos State attended.
That was very shameful. We have invited it. We have invited it on a good day. That
have a city boy CP.
Yes. On a good day, that CP should not have a job by the next day.
Absolutely, because you mentioned police, you mentioned INEC, and here we are seeing the police being openly partisan.
So we've extended the we've extended an invite to him because his people have not even spoken to say this is why CP went there. Is very, I don't know.
And there's an interaction with the political class, the electoral umpire, and the police as well. So inevitably we cannot expect good behavior from one without it impacting on the other. So we must also place accountability on speaking of INEC has talked about readiness to conduct this election without concern about the conduct of the police in Osun State. I wonder if we should be asking more questions of INEC as well, because election is a multi-stakeholder, conduct, not just one institution.
Absolutely.
So much to talk about as far as Osun is concerned, but we just must anchor it. Mr. Akintobi, Dayo Akintobi, by the way, is a journalist and public affairs analyst. Thank you for insights on the program.
My pleasure always. Good morning, Nigeria.